Welcome to i30N Owner, the YouTube channel where I talk about the Hyundai i30N from an owner's perspective. In today's video, I want to talk about whether or not the i30N is comfortable as a daily driver. So I don't really need to tread over already covered ground in terms of the performance aspect of the i30N. It's basically agreed by everybody that it is a great performance car for what it is, considering the price point and so on. You can spend the rest of your life arguing whether the Civic Type R or the Megane RS or whatever are better or worse performance for the money, but the i30N, you can't really fault from a realistic perspective the performance aspect of it. Great performance car, but what's it like from a comfort perspective as a daily driver? Because ultimately most hot hatchback buyers are buying a car that needs to be comfortable and practical on a daily basis, that can then also be taken for a spirited drive on the weekend or taken out to the racetrack for a thrash around. But can you live with the i30N on a daily basis? Because if you have had a really uncomfortable track-focused car in the past, for example, unless you're one of those people who just has zero interest in comfort, it gets pretty tiring on a daily basis. So I'm going to show you my experience as an owner of the i30N. So long story short, I find the i30N to be a decently comfortable car. I actually rate it higher on the comfort stakes than my old Suzuki Swift Sport. Now the issue with my Suzuki Swift Sport is it had very narrow sort of racing-inspired bucket seats in the front, a harsh, not particularly comfortable rear bench seat, and had a very, very plasticky interior. And look, to be honest, the i30N interior is reasonably plasticky as well. That's one of the key criticisms about it that I see in reviews. But when I compare the Swift Sport to the i30N interior is significantly further ahead in terms of comfort and kind of convenience features. Now my i30N, which is a fastback post-facelift model, has the standard seats, not the sports performance seats or whatever they're called. I can't comment on those, but the standard seats I find are really supportive and comfortable on both short trips and longer journeys, and I've not had any passenger complaint from any front seat passenger. There's enough adjustment on those front seats to provide average proportioned person or a conventionally proportioned person with the ability to get comfortable. If you're very, very tall or have very strange proportions, you might struggle a bit, I'm not sure, but certainly everybody who's sat in the car so far in the front seat has been really pleased. They like the features like seat heaters. It's nice having things like a heated steering wheel on my car. It's a comfortable place to sit in the front. In terms of the rear seat comfort, I would say the legroom is passable for the overall dimensions of the car. If you're over 6 foot, I wouldn't want to spend too much time in the back, at least not on longer journeys, or at the very least, if you're taller, you would want to be traveling in the hatchback and not the fastback variant. The legroom, I believe, is the same, but with the fastback, which is what I've got, the sloping roofline does compromise on the rear headroom somewhat, and also the sort of visibility out of the windows because of that sloping roofline, which can be a little bit claustrophobic, based off what a couple of people have said to me who've traveled on the back, but most people's comments have been really positive. And one thing I've got is the sunroof, which you can just open the sort of cover on it. You don't have to have the sunroof fully open. That brings more light in, and it makes the cabin feel a bit more airy as well. So both front and rear comfort, pretty good in a seating context. In terms of creature comforts, everything is about what you expect for a car of its class and price point. Slightly plasticky interior aside, the air conditioning I find very good on a hot day, much better than the air conditioning in my Swift, which really struggled when the temperature rose above about 25 degrees Celsius outside. The heater is good. The only thing to note is that the rear seat passengers don't get any air conditioning vents. There's decent storage space, there are cup holders. The whole package is just easy to live with on a daily basis in that true hot hatch style of being a usable daily car with a real performance edge. One thing I would say though here is, just to reiterate, if you are thinking of buying an i30N and you care about the comfort and practicality aspect of it, buy the hatchback, not the fastback. Now, seating comfort and kind of interior ergonomics and comfort aside, there is a elephant in the room, and that is what you have to bear in mind is the i30N is geared for performance. If you drive the i30N on normal roads, so the kinds of roads you would find in most cities or towns or country roads, if you drive it in sport mode, and especially if you drive it on the N mode without customizing the suspension settings using the N custom option, it's very harsh. You'll be bouncing around like a pinball inside a machine, basically. The N mode's really meant for spirited track driving or use on very decent roads where you don't care at all about the comfort aspect. You just want to get your hustle on. So driving the i30N around, even if the seats are comfortable, if you're doing it in N mode, you're doing it in sport mode all of the time, yeah, it can be a bit crashy, it can be a bit harsh. I would say sport mode is actually pretty tolerable. The N mode though, if you put N mode on with passengers in the car who don't know much about the car at all, and you drive around, and I took my mum out and my dad out in the car when I first got it, and my wife and father-in-law and all those kind of people, you stick it into N mode and pretty much everybody, you can see them bouncing up and down on the seats as you go along, hitting any imperfection on the road, and people will comment, wow, this is a bit, uncomfortable. But if you put it in normal mode, you put it in eco mode, it's not that bad at all. The ride is generally quite compliant, it's quite comfortable, and you won't get out of the car after a longer journey feeling like you've aged 10 years. Like I said earlier on in this video, I get out of my i30N after a trip, and as long as I've been driving in a normal mode, I feel more refreshed and comfortable than I did getting out of my Suzuki Swift Sport. Now, if you're very fussy, or you've spent the rest of your life driving luxury vehicles, or you've had something like a hydro-pneumatic suspension-equipped Citroen, which I've had one of those in the past, you might look at the i30N and say, hey, even in normal and eco modes, or with customization to the suspension settings, it's not comfortable enough. But for the average user who is buying a car because they want something that's both practical and usable on a daily basis, comfortable enough for sort of family driving duties, but also heaps and heaps of fun, you'll be pleased enough, I think. I'm pretty surprised with how comfortable the package is overall. One thing to note is that I'd spent a lot of time reading reviews over the lifespan of the i30N model because I've always been interested in them, and I think a lot of reviewers, professional reviewers, because they get to test higher end cars, luxury cars from premium European brands and higher end Japanese cars and all those kind of things, they're probably a little bit spoiled as to what constitutes a comfortable car for the average person on the street. The other aspect with the i30N is that you should note there's a decent amount of tyre noise. I think some of that, though, to be fair in my case, is here in New Zealand we have very average quality roads in most locations, and if you drive on that inferior quality road surface, you're going to pick up a bit of tyre noise, which can be a bit irritating on a longer trip. But on a better quality road, and I've tested it out on some nicer quality roads, it's not too bad at all. So long story short, is the i30N comfortable as a daily driver? Yes, I think if you go in with reasonable expectations and you drive it around in one of the more comfort or everyday focused modes, like normal mode or eco mode, for example, if you're expecting Rolls-Royce levels of refinement and comfort, you're going to be disappointed. If you expect to be able to drive on the full noise N mode, at least without toying with the suspension settings in the N custom mode, you're going to find the ride extremely harsh on all but the smoothest of surfaces, because that is dialed in for performance. Comfort doesn't even factor into it. If you want a more comfortable hot hatch out of the gate, I would suggest something like a Golf GTI as a good compromise option. The performance is not really as strong as the i30N, but the practicality and comfort aspects are superior in my experience. But I think the i30N, for what it is and what it sets out to be, and especially considering how easy it is to change through drive modes and everything, for the average person who is buying a car because they want something that's both fun and pretty practical and has the ability to be used every day, you shouldn't be too disappointed in the comfort stakes. So yeah, long story short, i30N, it's comfortable enough as a daily driver. I'd be keen to hear your thoughts if you're an owner or if you've test driven one or reviewed one. Please like this video if you found it interesting and helpful, and subscribe for more i30N content.